Welcome from the Evolutionary Leaders Unity and Peace and Interspirituality Synergy Circles. Joined with the 10th anniversary Interfaith Awareness Week of the World Interfaith Network, convened in August 2026 in Los Angeles. You'll be listening to the finale session with renowned interfaith and interspiritual leaders Matthew Fox and Mirabai Starr, with Ben Bowler of Unity Earth and Unity Earth Television, as introduced by Ruth Broyde Sharone. For the referred to video by Kurt Johnson, see the description of Interspirituality, Heritage, and Future at YouTube or the credits banner of this video. Thank you for joining us, and over now to this wonderful discussion.
Ben Bowler is really an extraordinary leader for peace and understanding. He lives in Australia. He travels the world regularly. I think his suitcase is on the edge of his bed. And he just came back a few days ago from receiving the award for oneness from the Interfaith Church at the United Nations. And he's a champion, and I want to thank Kurt, who is here tonight as well, for his exposition. And you take it away, Ben. I know you have a wonderful program planned for us.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Ruth, and thank you, Kurt. It's wonderful to be here in Interfaith Awareness Week. What an important platform. I understand it's 10 years that we've been running this platform for Interfaith Awareness Week. So congratulations to everybody involved. And it's an honor to be here. Ruth, I caught the last half of the Act 1 of the musical. How wonderful to see the arts being used in such a creative way to continue to advance this vital, important work. So congratulations to you and everybody involved there. I'm going to be hosting a conversation with two absolute luminaries of the interspiritual paradigm, legends, in fact, and that is Mirabai Starr and Matthew Fox. So I'm going to go ahead and do little introductions for Mirabai and Matthew as we bring them up. And we're going to be talking a little bit. Hi, Mirabai, good to see you. We're going to be talking a little bit about what we just heard from Kurt Johnson, laying out the whole kind of landscape. Father Matthew Fox, it's good to see you. Wonderful to have you here with us. Neither of you really need an introduction, but let me do the formals. It is a great joy to welcome Matthew Fox, theologian, spiritual teacher, activist, and one of the great pioneering voices of creation spirituality. For more than 5 decades, Matthew has invited us to rediscover the sacredness of creation, the wisdom of the mystics, and our responsibility to bring spirituality out of the sanctuary and into the great challenges of our time. So we welcome you, Matthew Fox. Let me do a quick introduction for Mirabai Starr as well. Mirabai is an author, teacher, translator of the mystics, and one of the most beautiful contemporary voices of the interspiritual movement. Mirabai has devoted her life to exploring the great mystical traditions, not as competing paths, but as different doorways into the same sacred mystery. Both of these luminaries, we could go on for forever talking about their accomplishment and their work, their written work and their contributions. But I think we want to dive in to the conversation. So let me start by saying, welcome, Mirabai and Matthew.
Thank you, Ben, and congratulations to you for the very much deserved recognition you've been receiving.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good to see you again, Mirabai. And
you too, Matthew.
Mm-hmm.
So let's dive into it. I think, Kurt Johnson just really laid out there what's at stake. When we look at the heritage, the history of the interspiritual movement, which is many-sided, and there's no one kind of view, or it's not like a homogeneous kind of reality. The interspiritual paradigm is something that we're all going to have different takes on. But I think what Kurt did lay out there is that what's at stake about continuing to evolve towards unity and wholeness in our spiritual perspectives is the difference between a perilous future or paradise. And so I think that, we really get a bit of a sense of what's on the table here. The other thing he laid out were the four different kind of general areas of the work, being the interfaith, interspiritual dynamic, which we're exploring here today, the ecological dimension with everything that holds, including a lot of the sacred feminine, that both of you have been leaders in that field. And then the subtle realms, which, when I read your introductions, the mystical dimension is something that both Mirabai and Matthew have been pioneers in. And then finally, from domination hierarchies to partnership. So there's a lot to unpack there. But maybe let's start with you, Mirabai, as we reflect on the message from Kurt before we get into a deeper discussion about where we're coming from and where we're going to. What stood out to you, Mirabai, and what would you like to sort of offer us by way of reflection on what we just saw?
First, I have to say, to be with Matthew Fox is such a joy and a privilege. I know he's not on the screen right now, but oh, there you are. Matthew and I met many years ago, and the minute we met, it was like, oh, it was just such a recognition of souls. So it is and we've done a lot of work together since then, teaching and writing. So it's quite an honor to be in conversation with him, and I feel daunted by even being put in the same little gallery of squares here. I think what stood out for me, surprise, is that the voice of the feminine is needed now more than ever. And I really feel that the heart of the interspiritual paradigm is a feminine heart. That Brother Wayne's interspiritual or mystical heart is the heart of the feminine. What I mean by that is all of these values that, by the way, are in all of us, people of all genders, and speaking to people of all genders. The values of loving kindness, of cooperation, of relationality, of connectedness to the earth, of embodiment. All of these values are kind of antithetical to what we see in the rising religious nationalism and authoritarianism all over the world. These sort of polar opposite values need to be emphasized. I don't think we need more arguments for why the interspiritual paradigm is superior to the more authoritarian or orthodox versions that might be being asserted. I think what we need is more deep, humble, heart-centered listening. Not that the feminine is all about receptivity and loving kindness. She's also the voice of fierce truth-telling. And that too is needed now more than ever.
Beautiful. Thank you, Mirabai. Let's bring Matthew in for his opening, maybe reflections on what Mirabai has shared and the broader video we just saw from Kurt Johnson.
Well, I very much delight in what everybody just said about the divine feminine. That there's no question that patriarchy, which is a way of seeing the world in terms of dualisms and power over, needs to yield to the healthy masculine, which does not see the world that way, and to the wisdom, and wisdom is a feminine term the world over, that welcomes the whole. And that leads us to the point that that was made by Kurt about the role of science, I think. Because today we're meeting at this amazing time. Yes, there's a lot of negativity going on in many respects, but also we are being given a new view of the universe. A Hubble telescope is passing these pictures on to us daily, if you will. But we're learning so much more about the vastness of the universe and the specialness of our Earth, of Mother Earth. Just today on NPR radio. I was driving and I heard this scientist say, he said, and he gave all these numbers about how many Earth-like planets there may be in the universe. But he said, so far, we've not heard from any of them. And he said, what I can say as a scientist is this: either we are alone in the universe, or we are very, very rare. Now, either of those things should stun all of us into amazement, what Rabbi Heschel called the radical amazement and awe that is the beginning of wisdom and is the beginning of our mystical lives, that we're all invited to the table here. And to realize that the universe is over 2 trillion galaxies big, each with hundreds of billions of stars and millions and billions of planets, is astounding. And it should open all our minds and hearts up. And I want to make one more connection to Kurt's work about the emphasis on science. And he, as he said, he himself comes out of science. But that science, I think, is here to among other things, to ignite awe in us, because we're at this moment of a new cosmology. And there are lessons even in science that parallel the teachings of compassion and behavior, compassionate behavior, that are at the heart of all the religions of the world. And the key is the word interdependence or interconnectivity, because that's really the meaning of compassion. Compassion is acting out of our common joy and our common suffering. And that's what we celebrate in worship, whatever tradition you come from. And that's what we honor in our joining hands and arms and feet to protest. Our deep yes and our deep no. This is what mystical life is all about. This is what healthy religion is all about. And the fact that science is now on board, because compassion is that capacity to act out of interdependence. And interdependence is now being named anew as a law of the universe by science. But this is the key of all religious understanding, spiritual understanding, I think, of our capacity for compassion, which in the Jewish tradition, compassion is a secret name for God. And in Luke's gospel, in the Christian tradition, Jesus says, be you compassionate as your creator in heaven is compassionate. So our capacity to imitate the divine, and of course the Dalai Lama says, we can do away with all religion, but we can't do away with compassion, which is my religion, he said. Well, I think compassion is at the heart of all religions. And now we have science on board, and the potential for this marriage is untold.
Matthew, thank you. There's a lot in there. There's a lot in there for us to digest. I want to come back to this beautiful convergence of the higher domains of science, evolutionary biology, cosmology, quantum mechanics, quantum physics, which really are lining up with the higher dimensions or the deeper dimensions of our mystical experience. And yes, that's a very positive, emergent reality that you've identified, and we want to maybe come back to that. But Mirabai, I want to circle back to you about something you brought in around Christian nationalism. And it's not just Christian nationalism in one country. There is these rising ideologies around the world, which are a different kind of marriage to what Matthew was just talking about, which is a marriage of nationalism and fundamentalist religion. And I think if I heard you correctly, you're saying we as the interspiritual members of the interspiritual paradigm cannot be out there saying, well, we've got a better version of what you've got, and another kind of sort of domination, hierarchical narrative. So I want to go deeper into that. How shall we be with our brothers and sisters, whether they're Hindu nationalism in India, whether it's Buddhist nationalism in Myanmar, whether it's Christian nationalism in America? How can we better listen, and how can we better respond to the rise when we see nationalism wed to religious fundamentalism? What is the highest possible response.
You know, it's said that the mystics of all spiritual traditions have much more in common with one another than the mystics and the fundamentalists of any single religion do. And that has to do with this path of the heart that you're alluding to. I mean, the trick for me is not to speak louder, but to listen more deeply and to risk in the listening a kind of conversion of the heart. So I don't plan on being converted to Christian nationalism, and I will be protecting my heart against anyone who's trying to convince me of that line of reasoning. But what I do know about the interspiritual path, which is a little different than the interfaith than interfaith dialogue, which is a practice that I have the deepest regard for, where people of different faith traditions, kind of like the fashion show we were just seeing, are listening respectfully to each other, to what each other love most and value most about their own traditions, listening with humility, building tolerance. For me, the interspiritual path isn't about tolerating. It's about opening our hearts so radically that we dare to be fundamentally transformed by our encounter with the other. Now, that's easier to say when you're speaking about a mystical Jew and a Sufi, for instance. Like, yes, I will chant the names of the 99 beautiful names of Allah with you, and then you come to my Shabbat service on Friday, and we'll break bread together, and we will allow each other to I will allow you to be who you are and see if we can meet in a place where there is all othering dissolves. But when we're speaking about people who would like to see us eradicated from the face of the earth, I mean, I'm pretty sure that most Christian nationalists, when they look at me as a Jewish woman by birth who has Sufi initiation and Buddhist practice and a Hindu guru and a deep love of the Christian mystics. In fact, I was recently baptized by Jim Finley. Matthew was there. Then, you know, they don't want me at the table. So how do I open my heart to someone who would rather that I just shut the heck up and disappear? I mean, I guess I'm answering your question with another question, Ben, but it doesn't scare me. Okay, I know that these times are so urgent that I must listen, even to the seemingly most radical other. My new version of God of Love, a book that I wrote years ago that's coming out, has a foreword by Greg Boyle, Father Greg Boyle. And I love Greg's response to all of it, which is there is no other, there is no them, there is only us. There are no evil people, there are only hurt people. And so I guess as a grief guide, which I also am, and as a mom, I would look for the hurt first.
It's a beautiful space of response, Mirabai. Thank you for sharing that. I think there's a lot more attributed to psychology in people's spirituality and religious viewpoints than often we're aware of, and the wounded child that we can see playing out on the global scale. So we're kind of traversing this space, Matthew, from the heritage to the future, but we're right here in the now. And so in the now, we are dealing with this almost peerless optimism of what's possible with all these things rising together, the mystical traditions that meet each other in that space that you two have been pioneering for half a century. And that there's, so many leaders and speakers and mystics that point that way forward. And now you're bringing in science and what's possible when the science meets the mystical journey, and that is just absolutely stunning. It's an invitation into wholeness at a whole new order. But at the same time, we're traversing the political currents of now. I think Kurt referenced Pope Leo saying the world is run by I wasn't thugs, but it was something akin to that. And so what would be your kind of take on what is a spiritual response to that particular now that we are meeting the moment, Matthew, with the incredible invitation to an unprecedented adventure, while at the same time traversing these very deep, challenging currents of tribalism, us versus them, our group, our ethnic group, our religious tradition, and keep everybody else out, which we're facing literally all over the planet right now.
Well, I very much appreciate what Mirabai just said and how she ended, quoting her priest friend, that they're only hurt people because psychologists looking at fascism, which is organized sadism, or what Susan Sontag called institutionalized violence, what they invariably find, like Eric Fromm is explicit about this, because he studied, having come out of the Holocaust and being Jewish, he studied where does all this hatred come from. But he's not alone, but he was one of the pioneers. But he said fascism comes from self-hatred. And that has been reaffirmed by many other thoughtful examiners of human nature since him. Self-hatred. And so we have to ask, what are the forces in culture that create self-hatred? And this is also, I think, where injustice, where the sociological and the psychological meet. That injustice can create a circumstance where people hate themselves and therefore hate others. Or despair comes in here too. Thomas Aquinas says that despair is the most dangerous of all sins, that injustice is the worst. It affects the most. But that when you're in despair, you don't care about yourself and therefore you don't care about anybody else. And there is a growing rise of despair. Indeed, just this past week, there was a brilliant conversation with Arthur Brooks about, and he talked about how depression has tripled in the last 15 years in America, tripled. And especially among young people, and especially among young people who are married to the social media. And I was glad, again, to hear Kurt bring that topic up too, how this new invention, and that's what it is playing havoc on our souls, actually. And again, in terms of medicine, what do we do when people are carrying self-hatred around in them and therefore projecting it onto others? And I'd like to return to a earlier point that Mirabai made about when she said that the divine feminine is fierce. The tradition of the Black Madonna in the West, and parallel traditions in the East, point out that the feminine, as Mirabai was saying, can be very fierce, and fierce about falsehood and lies, as well as about murder and hatred projected. So there is a resurgence today in the West, I think, of the archetype of the Black Madonna. And there's a wonderful book coming out this fall about it. And the Black Madonna carries this kind of energy, both the energy of compassion and of truth and a fierce commitment to both, but also standing up to, saying no to folly, to the opposite of wisdom, which is folly. And of course, hating each other is folly. Again, science is on board, as you've been saying, because evolution is demonstrating that cooperation is more important than competition in our having arrived and hung around this long. But I think one meditation that I find very useful is to meditate on all of these other two-legged ones, are our cousins, the Neanderthal, the Denisons, and we're finding, I think we found 15 others now. And what they all have in common is they're extinct. That extinction is a real possibility for Homo sapiens. There's no guarantee. We've been here about 300,000 years, and we're not acting wisely at all. And so the whole interfaith movement, I think, is a sign of hope, and the movement of return of the divine feminine and women's rights, but also to shake up what we mean by masculinity. All that is a integral package. And what I find as medicine, frankly, is the mystics. I've just finished a book on John of the Cross, and Mirabai gifted me with a beautiful foreword to it. She's written about John the Cross too. But one of the things I really was struck by in rediscovering him and reinterpreting him is how important the via positiva was to him when he was in prison, dying, being tortured daily by his own brothers, and losing weight and everything. He turned to imagining the Song of Songs, which he was forbidden to read. So he created his own Song of Songs. And the Song of Songs is a love poem. It is about the sensual and the physical and the emotional and the spiritual dimensions of love. And that's why his favorite name for God was my beloved, the beloved, which is a very Sufi name for the divine. And of course, his mother had Moorish background, so he had that in going for him too. But the point is that you fill yourself up with love, however your imagination can bring it in. And that is how you banish self-hatred. And Jesus, who was so down to earth, said it in one sentence: love others as you love yourself. What he's saying is, if you don't love yourself, that's the pathway to hatred. And that's what a lot of these political movements today are about. They are gathering people to hate the other. And this is why the mystical affirmation of our non-duality, of our not being separate, and the scientific affirmation, 30 minutes after you're in a room with somebody, you're breathing their air, you're breathing their breath. So, hey, this is just built into nature, that we're already community. We're already part of one another. And so it shouldn't be that much of a struggle to discover anew that love is what makes things go around, as Dante said. It even makes the stars go around and the universe go around. So we have these teachings from our wisdom traditions that really need to be we're going to say heralded and spoken loudly today. And I think this is why the return of the mystics, which Mirabai has been a wonderful champion of, and which I've been able to work on too, is so important, because people are saying, oh, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. Well, if you're spiritual, then you've got to know the mystics, because that's what they were too. And that's why so many got in trouble with their own religions, because they put the love first. And Jesus was one of those.
Oh my gosh. Matthew, thank you. Thank you. Could just listen to that fountain of wisdom coming through. And I do really deeply appreciate how you've reframed a lot of the challenges that we're facing in the world as originating as a kind of self-contempt, self-hatred, and then the despair, which then follows in the way we treat not just each other, but the way we treat life, all of life, as a result of that our own inner judgments. There's a lot there, of course, to explore. But I think Return of the Mystics seems to be the space that the two of you are holding. I know, Mirabai, I've seen you talk about your work with St. John of the Cross earlier as well. And just seems to me that the medicine that you are pointing us towards, both of you, is this plethora, this endless smorgasbord of spiritual traditions, mystical traditions, going back tens of thousands of years to indigenous wisdom traditions, all the way through to modern mystics like you two. There really is no end to what we can draw upon. So maybe as we turn now to look at the future with an optimistic and a positive and a sort of spiritual hope and confidence, maybe Mirabai, you can share with us, what are you seeing as your own personal growing edge of what's next in calling you, but also what would you share with the global community as things of highest value in exploring the mystical resources that are available to us for personal transformation and also for ultimately for world transformation?
Well, thanks for that question, Ben. I would say one of the hallmarks of the mystical way is paradox. A mystic has a lot of tolerance. I'll bring that word back in a positive way for ambiguity, for seemingly contradictory propositions, creating a synthetic or truer truth. And and so I feel like I am embodying a paradox right now in my own on my own path. I've been on a spiritual path for 50 years. I'm 65 now, in which I am busy dismantling religiosity, institutionalized thinking, hierarchical a hierarchical or patriarchal paradigm. And at the same time, I am madly in love with the mystics and the teachings of the mystics across the world's great spiritual traditions. And I am mining those jewels. I am gathering those seeds, really, and planting them as fast as I can and watering them the best I can in community, not solo. The other thing I want to say that those of you who are listening might consider, I think that there's a resonance in this interfaith community here with this, is that I see three ways to walk an interspiritual path. At least there are many more, but I'm going to name the three main ones as I see them right now. One is to be rooted in a single faith tradition with a heart and a mind that are open to the beauty of all the great wisdom traditions. So you stay rooted in that ground that you've cultivated with such love. You don't have to leave. It's right there. That's one way. Another way is to what Matthew Wright called multiple religious belonging, to have two or three deep spiritual paths and to walk them all, to walk all of those paths with in as harmonious a way as you can. And you can. You can. The third way, which I think is more my way, having grown up in the counterculture of the 1970s in Taos, New Mexico, is more maybe would be called the spiritual but not religious. But even that is a misnomer in the sense that, so I do not plant myself in any single or even two or three traditions as my home base. I can't. I am temperamentally unsuited to picking one or even two or three. My heart maintains a porousness that I value. I can't seem to live any other way. And I think a lot of people are that way. I think especially younger people these days are I mean, yes, there are people are returning to religion statistically. I hear the research, but I think that a lot of people are not temperamentally suited for religion and for any kind of exclusive membership, even in spacious membership. So that I think is another way to walk an interspiritual path, to be open to the beauty and power and wisdom of the world's great spiritual traditions. We don't have to throw those babies out with the bathwater. And yet I think a lot of people are not at home in a religious context particularly, and yet are deeply mystical beings.
I have a quick follow-up question for you, Mirabai, about the third group in particular. So the third group in particular that are not rooted in one religion and open to a global perspective, or embodying a multiple belonging in two or three religious traditions. But the third group
Community. You're going to say community, aren't you?
no, I actually have more of a concern. More of a concern is there a challenge around superficiality
Yes.
with
Okay.
some of the spiritual but not religious, take up ceremony with
Yes.
this and a bit of this and a bit of that, and then there's nothing really like there ultimately.
Yeah. I thought that was, mostly what people ask me is that question, or what about community? Because that's one thing that religion gives us so beautifully, is a sense of community and belonging. I had the great fortune of spending time with Father Thomas Keating in the last 10 years of his life. And he would ask that question, like, of all of us who were on, right, Kurt, those of us who were championing this interspiritual paradigm, it's all well and good, but, and maybe you guys are going deep, but a lot of people will not. You know, cafeteria Catholicism was one of those words, or superficial. I write about this a lot, Ben, and y'all, a lot, and I've spoken about it a lot. So how do I distill it here? I'm not worried about that. I am not worried about that. It is so worth it. And I believe in us. I believe in our capacity, like bees, to know where the nectar is in the garden and to drink it, not only for our own nourishment, but to propagate, to cross pollinate, and to be instruments of peace in this world. I don't see a lot of selfish interspiritual people who are just taking the little bits that they want for their own benefit and not going deep. What is that horrible analogy of trying to get to water by digging many shallow wells? Bullshit. Sorry. I believe in us, and when we encounter truth, we it awakens our heart. The awakens bodhicitta, as they say in Buddhism, the awakened heart, and we cannot not go deep. I've been on this interspiritual path since I was 15, and I have gone more deeply across multiple spiritual spaces than I ever could have in my beautiful home tradition of Judaism, where on Yom Kippur, for instance, you know, it's such a deep and powerful and transformational spiritual practice. But if that was all I had, I would be impoverished. So I believe in our capacity to go deep, Ben.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Mirabai. I'm with you. I think when people share, taste a little different things, they're going to find what they're calling them forward. It was also 25 years ago, Matthew, that you, speaking about wells, had written the book One River, Many Wells, which laid a lot of this out. But 25 years on from the publication of that landmark work, what do you see as your own kind of evolving edge, Father Matthew Fox? And I suppose as we begin to close this session, what are you pointing us towards? You've already mentioned some things, I think, in this dialogue, but what else would you be pointing us towards as of being of high value right now for this community and for the greater world?
Well, when I was silenced and 3 years later expelled from the Dominican Order, which I'd been a member of 34 years by the previous papacy, not Pope Francis, but two papacies before him, I became an Episcopalian because I truly love liturgy and worship. And I think that ritual is a very important part of building community. And it's at the essence of religion. In fact, Malidome Some, the spiritual teacher from Africa, who was sent to America by his elders to teach us ritual, he used to say there is no community without ritual. And so, since becoming an Episcopalian 30 years ago, I became an Episcopalian to work with young people from Sheffield, England, who at the time were taking the new postmodern art forms of DJ and VJ and rap and rave and bringing it into the church, into liturgy. And I felt that was very, very powerful. That another thing Malidome Some teaches is that when a culture loses spirituality, only the young can bring it back. And the fact that the young were devising this new language and bringing it to worship truly interested me. I just finished my book on the reinvention of work. The last chapter was on reinventing ritual and liturgy, and I talked there about bringing the body back. And so the whole idea of dancing, which is the ancient way to pray, I've been blessed by praying a lot with indigenous people, and that's the ancient way to pray. And it affects all 7 chakras, not just the head about what you believe or what you think or what you're being preached to about or what you're reading from a sacred text. So I think that the Cosmic Mass, which is what we've devised over these 30 years, we've done over 125 of them in many places in North America, including at the World Parliament of Religions in Toronto and Chicago, and before that in Salt Lake City. I have seen such powerful results of it, such powerful results. And all kinds of people come. Talk about deep ecumenism, interfaith. Buddhists come. In fact, at the Toronto World Parliament, Buddhist monks were there in their orange robes. And Muslims come. And Christians of all denominations and Jewish people. We had one mass, the theme was the Kabbalah. And after 9/11, we had a mass of the Rumi, and we invited an imam to come and to do the little teaching with us. So, and even atheists come. I did a mass for 1,000 people at Sounds True retreat. They have an annual retreat up in the mountains of Colorado every year, and they invite us to do the mass. And afterwards, a woman came up. She said, "I'm an atheist. I'm a fierce atheist. I'm such a fierce atheist that when I walk down the street and there's a church, I cross the street to go by the church." But she said, something happened to me tonight. And she hit her heart like this, hit her chest and said, when we did the grieving, because grieving is a big part of the Mass, we get down on all sixes and we grieve. Grieving is so important. And especially at this time, everyone is grieving, whether they know it or not, about what's happening to the earth today. But she said, when we did that, she said, something shifted inside of me. By the time communion came along, she said, I had to have some. I was hungry for it. My whole life was changed tonight, she said. I don't know what's ahead for me. But my point is that ritual, using contemporary art forms, is capable of deep ecumenism and interfaith and bringing people together. It's absolutely intrinsic in human nature to celebrate and to grieve. And that's what good religion does. And celebration is about thank you. As Meister Eckhart said, if the only prayer you're saying in your whole life is thank you, that would suffice. So that's the via positiva. The via negativa is grieving. And the via creativa is the sharing of bread and wine. And the via transformativa is a strong dance that we do at the end to prepare yourself for your prophetic work, your warrior work that is ahead, because there are serious battles that we need to engage in. So we follow the 4 paths of spirituality in the Mass, and I just tell you, now what's interesting to me is that Pope Leo lately has come out very much in favor of rave as a practice of festivity. He's shown up at many rave events because there's a priest, 57 years old, from Portugal, who is a DJ, a disc jockey, and he does these outdoor raves. But often like he did one in Lisbon, the first one that I saw was televised, and the Pope showed up on the big screen that was hung on the cathedral, an ancient cathedral in Lisbon. And but everyone's dancing, etc. And what we've done, I intend to write the Pope very soon about how we've brought rave into the church, not just doing it outside the church, to generate new energy in the tradition of Western liturgy. And I just think this is extremely important because it's in ritual that you hear the new creation story and it's set in a sacred context. This ritual is the indigenous way of teaching the big things, our relationship, wisdom, and our place in creation, the sacredness of creation. And so it's been thoroughly maligned, ritual has, by the modern era, because we all got in our heads because we were so happy we learned how to read and write, and we have printing presses and all that stuff. That's behind us. Using this media technology and art form, I'm speaking from experience. Over 130 of these masses, and things happen. People shift, like that atheist lady, but all kinds of people. And so the potential of ritual, first of all, is vast, but Secondly, it's absolutely necessary. I believe what Melodrome Somi said. There is no community without ritual. And if we're lacking community, which we sure are today, everywhere, the problem is we're lacking ritual that's vivacious and alive and real. And so I speak with passion there. And just one other point is I started with young people, 30-year-old and 31-year-old, a new kind of order called the Order of the Sacred Earth. Because you look at the history of religions, orders pop up when religion is on the downslide. For example, Francis of Assisi developed his order because the monks were too comfortable, too fat, too lazy, and out in the country. And Francis, like Dominic, a peer of his, realized that there are communes of young people that really are making things happen. And he mirrored his order on these communes of young people in the late 12th century. So the Order of the Sacred Earth is radically interfaith because we take one vow. I promise to be the best lover of Mother Earth and the best defender of Mother Earth that I can be. In other words, the best mystic, the mystic is a lover, and the best prophet or warrior, the one who says no, who interferes, as Rabbi Asher said. And we've had this group going for 8 years or so around. We have about 65 different pods or small communities around, and we meet once every month, last Tuesday of every month. But again, I would like to see this flourish because why wouldn't the perils of the sacred earth today be drawing all of us, whether we're in any tradition or none? And that's the kind of thing that Mirabai was talking about, to gather together to support one another and to experiment, to find ways in which we are contributing to the health of Mother Earth and assisting others who are doing the same. So that whole idea of taking the past and reinventing it in today's circumstance. Let's say one more thing. Christianity has only existed during the age of Pisces, 2,000 years, age of Pisces. And so a lot of its forms were dictated by the age of Pisces. Pisces is dualistic, two fish swimming in the opposite direction. But now we're in the age of Aquarius. The age of Aquarius is about mysticism. It's about the unconscious. It's about bringing forward the water, and that's feminine energy, into the circle. And so, of course, we're being asked today to reinvent so many forms that we took for granted for 2,000 years. But as Mirabai said, we don't have to throw the baby out with the bath. That there are so many archetypes in the Last Supper, in the Eucharist, that have not even been mined yet, and in the inherited liturgy. But we have to really open up to its possibilities. And if you bring the body in, which is the essence of the cosmic mass, everything is possible. And I've just seen and felt so much ecstasy and so much awakening in so many people who've undergone this experience that I just know that ritual is essential for our survival as a species. It always has been. Why wouldn't it be today especially? Because we're crazy in our heads and all the rest. And we're, so of course we have to bring the body back. And this is what's missing when people get addicted to screens and so forth.
Matthew, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your vision and your leadership over these many, many years. You're speaking profound wisdom, and I think we can feel it. The cosmic mass is such a beautiful form. And, now if the Pope is bringing back the raves, I'm of an age where I know a lot of people in the 90s who had very spiritual experiences, non-denominational completely, at raves all over the world. And so you're speaking, absolutely is something vital into the space, and something that we're hungry for and that we need, and that is transformational and is community and is positive. And even, it might be a dirty word, but the idea of worship as something to maybe bring back and put in the center. In the Eastern traditions, it's bhakti, which people can get to, this idea of devotion. But there's an idea around worship as well, which I think you're speaking and pointing us towards, which as medicine, as healing, as community, as transformational shared experience. So I just want to deep thank you for your time and wisdom today, Matthew Fox. It is not lost on us everything you are putting forward. And I love the creation of this new sacred order. This is powerful medicine, powerful work. So blessings on everything that you are continuing to give to the world. And in final reflection, before we throw to Mirabai to close us out, is I love the balance between the mystical and the prophetic. That you're not calling us just to go and be mystics, or you're not just calling us to go and be raging prophets, but you're calling for that harmonization that each individual human is called in these days, in these prophetic days, to become both and to become the best mystic and the best prophet we each can be. Thank you, Matthew Fox. Mirabai, let's come, and it's only appropriate, I think, for you to close us out. This has been a very rich and enlivening and vigorous conversation, going from the heritage, traversing some of the rocky roads of the now, and then looking into a beckoning future that calls us forth. Let's come to you, Mirabai Starr, for our closing remarks.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Matt, for your companionship on the way. I'm part of the Order of the Sacred Earth. I've participated in Cosmic Mass and can't wait to again. What you are doing, as Ben said, is vital in this world. And Ben, I hope you know that when I said bullshit, I wasn't speaking to you. I was talking about this cliche of, you can't get to water by digging many shallow wells. So we're not digging shallow wells, y'all. What we're doing is opening our hearts to the presence of the sacred, which is the presence of love everywhere we encounter it. And that takes a kind of rigor that just going along with the belief systems that were handed to us do not require of us. The easy path is to not question and to not grapple and wrestle like Jacob did with the angel when he was transformed into Israel. So love requires a kind of fierce courage, that we are willing to dismantle the armor around our hearts. And so the way of the mystic is the way of love. And I think what I'm calling us all to do is to be ordinary, everyday mystics in the middle of our lives, rather than looking to some kind of external form to tell us how to connect and become intimate with the sacred. We can do it at the kitchen sink. We can do it while dancing. We can do it while protesting. And there are many ways to just clear the path to love.
Beautiful. Beautiful, Mirabai. Thank you. Thank you, Mirabai Starr. Thank you, Matthew Fox. This has been the 10th annual World Interfaith Awareness Week. And we want to thank you both, and thank you to everyone who's produced this, Becky behind the scenes, and Ruth, over to you for, I think we're closing the week. That was amazing.
I'm feeling so gratified that our two communities have come together. And I hope it will become a ritual that we will enact many times through the year. And do you remember the last line from Casablanca? Right? When the gendarme puts his arm around Rick from the cafe and says, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. So that's what I imagine for our two communities.